How to build warrior discipline, the Musashi way. Imagine waking up every day not driven by your emotions, not swayed by external praise or criticism, but anchored in something deeper, an unshakable principle, a code. That's what it means to live with warrior discipline, and no one embodied this more than Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai, philosopher and artist, who mastered not just the sword, but the art of living. But the Musashi way isn't about violence or aggression, it's about clarity, purpose, and the courage to confront yourself. We're not talking about discipline as punishment, we're talking about discipline as liberation. Because when you have discipline, you are no longer a slave to impulse. You become the sculptor of your life. Musashi wasn't just a fighter, he was a thinker, and that's what makes his way so profound. He won over 60 duels, often against skilled warriors, and he never lost. But what made him lethal wasn't just his technique, it was his mindset. He didn't fight with anger, he didn't fight with ego, he fought with precision, with calm, with presence. His discipline wasn't a routine, it was a philosophy, and that philosophy came down to one thing: know the way broadly, and you will see it in all things. That means the path of the sword is not separate from the path of life. Discipline on the battlefield reflects discipline in your thoughts, your actions, your decisions, your habits. It's all one.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But let's be honest, we live in a world that rewards the opposite. Distraction is everywhere. We're encouraged to chase dopamine, to avoid discomfort, to outsource responsibility. And that's exactly why the Musashi way is more relevant now than ever. Because we're not fighting other warriors, we're fighting ourselves. Our laziness, our fears, our doubts, our excuses. So the real question is, how do you build the kind of discipline that doesn't collapse under pressure? The kind that endures failure, boredom, pain, even success? Musashi gives us clues, but not in the form of hacks or tips. He gives us principles. And the first one is this: do nothing that is of no use. That sounds simple, but it's radical. Think about your day. How much of it is spent on things that don't serve your purpose? How much of it is driven by habit, by fear of missing out, by the need to be entertained? Warrior discipline begins when you start cutting away the unnecessary, not just physical clutter, but mental clutter, emotional clutter. You begin to see that every action is either sharpening your blade or dulling it. There is no neutral. Everything you do either strengthens your discipline or weakens it. This leads us to a deeper truth. Discipline is not about force, it's about alignment. It's not about crushing your desires, it's about clarifying them. Musashi wasn't austere because he hated pleasure. He was austere because he prioritized mastery. He saw every indulgence, every distraction, every ego trip as a step away from his path. And that's the level of clarity we need, not just knowing what we want, but knowing what we're willing to give up to get it, because discipline is sacrifice. You're choosing to say no to what's easy so you can say yes to what matters, over and over and over again. But discipline without philosophy is just rigidity. That's why Musashi didn't just train his body, he trained his mind. He painted, he wrote, he meditated, he questioned, he studied nature. He understood that the warrior's edge came not just from repetition but from reflection. You can't build true discipline if you don't know who you are. And here's the hard part. Most of us are afraid to actually sit with ourselves, to confront the chaos within. But Musashi wasn't. He went into the mountains alone for years to study himself, to battle his inner demons, to master the mind that controls the sword. And that's what we must do too. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in silence long enough to hear your own thoughts clearly? When was the last time you questioned your own motives, your own habits, your own excuses, not to judge them, but to understand them? That's where discipline begins. Not in the gym, not in the office, not in some motivational video. It starts in the mirror. When you look yourself in the eye and say, I will not betray myself today. And that's the ultimate test of discipline. Not how much you can do when you're motivated, but how much you can stay aligned when you're not. When no one is watching, when it's boring, when it's hard, when the results haven't come yet. That's when you find out who you really are. Because discipline is not about the outcome, it's about the process. Musashi didn't aim to win duels. He aimed to master the way. The victories were just milestones. The real victory was against the self. So here's your challenge. Can you live today as if every action mattered? Not to impress anyone, not to chase success, but because you refuse to live below your potential. That's the Musashi way, not flashy, not loud, just precise, intentional, unbreakable. The art of inner combat. How Musashi mastered himself before he mastered the sword. Before Musashi ever defeated another man, he had to defeat something far more cunning, far more relentless. Himself. The battlefield of the mind is where every war is truly fought, and Musashi understood this better than anyone. He knew that if he couldn't conquer his own impulses, his fears, his ego, then it didn't matter how skilled he was with a blade, he would lose. Because the enemy outside is never stronger than the enemy within. And this is where most people fail, not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because they haven't learned how to endure themselves. We all have internal conflict. You know the voice. The one that says, you've done enough for today when you know you haven't. The one that urges comfort when you've sworn to chase growth. The one that whispers, you're not good enough, when you're on the edge of a breakthrough. Musashi didn't silence that voice by ignoring it. He faced it every single day. He tested it, challenged it. He looked it in the eye and said, you don't control me, I control you. That is inner combat. That is warrior discipline. And it is a battle we must all fight, not once, but constantly. But how do we do that today, in a world where distraction is designed, where dopamine is sold as a product and weakness is normalized? We start the way Musashi did, by stripping away the unnecessary. He intentionally lived like a vagabond, not because he couldn't afford wealth, but because he saw it as a trap. He knew that comfort breeds softness, that luxury weakens resolve. So he embraced discomfort, not as suffering, but as sharpening. Every moment without ease was a moment of growth, Every hardship was a weapon for the soul. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you did something hard on purpose? Not for a reward, not for recognition, just to prove to yourself that you could. That's part of the Musashi way. Voluntary hardship, choosing effort over ease, choosing truth over comfort. Because if you only train when it's convenient, if you only show up when it feels good, then your discipline is an illusion. Real discipline is forged in resistance. It's built in the moments when no one claps for you, when you doubt yourself, when your emotions scream stop, and your spirit calmly replies, keep going. But inner combat isn't just about brute force. It's also about awareness. Musashi taught that perception is key. He could read his opponents before they moved, because he had trained himself to observe without bias, to see clearly. And that clarity came from stillness, from presence, from detachment. You can't fight the internal war if you're lost in reaction. You have to step back. You have to become the watcher, the strategist of your own mind. That means questioning your thoughts, not obeying them. Challenging your narratives, not being ruled by them. Think about this deeply. How much of your suffering comes not from reality, but from your interpretation of it? Musashi understood that pain is real, but suffering is optional. That fear is natural, but paralysis is not. He trained himself to act in spite of emotion, not because of it. And that is perhaps the hardest discipline of all, to feel everything fully, yet remain unmoved in your purpose, to be both human and unshakable. That's what made Musashi a master, not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. He once wrote, "The true way of the warrior means to be in tune with the universe." That's not just poetic, it's strategic. It means aligning your inner world so completely that nothing outside can throw you off balance. It means being so grounded in your values, your intentions, your vision, that chaos becomes irrelevant. Every distraction, noise. Every setback, training. Every failure, feedback. That's the mind of a warrior. That's the heart of discipline. And this is where we draw the line between discipline and obsession. Musashi didn't chase perfection, he chased alignment. He didn't control the world, he controlled his response to it. And that gave him power no opponent could touch. You and I, we have the same potential, but we have to earn it. We have to choose it every day. So ask yourself now and answer honestly, what part of your life are you losing to your own undisciplined mind? What battles are you surrendering, not because you're outmatched, but because you're outwitted by your own internal resistance? That's where the real Musashi work begins. Not with a sword, not with a schedule, but with yourself. Precision over power. Why the warrior chooses mastery over motivation. We live in a world obsessed with power. Power in the form of status, strength, influence, dominance. But Musashi chose something different, something quieter, something far more enduring, precision. He understood that raw power without control is dangerous, chaotic, and ultimately self-defeating. A sword swung wildly is more likely to injure the wielder than the enemy. In life, the same principle applies. Most people chase motivation, but motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls with mood, with weather, with likes and comments. Precision, on the other hand, is eternal. It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't need applause. It just is. Think about this. Motivation is emotional. Precision is strategic. Musashi didn't wake up every day hoping to feel like training. He trained because it was the way. He didn't rely on hype, music, or external push. He relied on rhythm, on ritual, on repetition. That's mastery. The ability to execute the same movement, the same task, with the same presence, whether you're inspired or not, whether anyone's watching or not. That's where greatness lives, not in intensity, but in consistency. And that's what we've forgotten. We celebrate explosive effort, not sustained effort. We admire the person who works 20 hours in one day, not the one who works 4 hours every day for 10 years. But Musashi knew the truth. Power fades. Precision refines. The more you do something with awareness, the more it sharpens you, not just in skill but in character. A disciplined act, repeated with attention, becomes a path to self-acknowledge, whether it's writing, training, parenting, building, breathing. It's all a dojo if you approach it with presence. So you have to ask yourself, are you chasing the feeling of progress or the reality of it? Because they're not the same. The feeling is addictive. It gives you a rush, a hit, a sense of movement. But real progress is often invisible. It's boring, it's quiet, it's doing the thing when no one clapped, it's showing up when you'd rather sleep. It's refining your form, not for praise, but for truth. Musashi didn't become undefeated because he was the strongest. He became undefeated because he was the most precise. He saw where others were blind. He moved when others hesitated. He struck only when necessary. But when he did, it was final. This is why Musashi said, "Do not think dishonestly," because dishonest thinking is the enemy of precision. It leads to shortcuts, to self-deception, to compromise. It whispers, "That's good enough," when you know it isn't. It says, "No one will notice," when you already have. Precision requires honesty. Brutal, unflinching self-honesty. It means looking at your performance and asking not, was it good, but was it true? And that question cuts deeper than any blade. But here's the paradox. Precision doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. Not surrender to laziness or chaos, but surrender to the process, to the way. Musashi didn't resist repetition, he embraced it. He didn't fear the mundane, he mastered it. Because he knew that within the ordinary lies the extraordinary. The difference between a master and a novice isn't talent. It's a tender. The master sees what the novice overlooks. The master doesn't just go through the motions, he becomes the motion. And so must we. If you want to build warrior discipline, stop chasing highs. Stop waiting for inspiration. Start refining your craft, whatever it is, with ruthless consistency. Cut away the fluff. Remove what doesn't serve. Simplify, focus, repeat. Because the more precise you become, the less effort you need. Power is loud, precision is silent. But silence is where the real work happens. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you approached every task like a master swordsman, not rushing, not hesitating, just clear, calm, focused, every word, every action, every decision, a cut, a strike, a step on the path. That's the Musashi way, not because it's easy, but because it's true. He with honor, not regret, the final lesson of the warrior life. Every warrior must one day lay down their sword. Every path, no matter how disciplined, ends. But the question is not when we die, it's how we live before we do. For Musashi, death was not a fear to be avoided, it was a companion to be respected. He meditated on it daily, not morbidly, but courageously. Because when you remember that your time is limited, your decisions become sacred. Your discipline becomes not a burden, but a gift. You stop wasting time on trivialities. You stop betraying your highest self for comfort. You stop living like you have forever. Musashi's final lesson was this: live in such a way that when death comes, you do not beg for more time. You bow to it, knowing you gave everything. That's honor. That's the culmination of warrior discipline. Not trophies, not applause, but alignment. You lived your code, you followed your way, you became who you were meant to become. And that's not something you stumble into by chance. That's something you forge with clarity, with sacrifice, with intention. Look around. How many people are living with regret already, even before they die? Regret for not starting, regret for not finishing, regret for choosing what was easy over what was right. Musashi had no such regrets. Not because his life was perfect, but because his effort was complete. He didn't run from fear. He walked through it. He didn't wait to be ready. He acted and refined as he went. He didn't need motivation. He had purpose. And this is where we must turn inward, because we are all writing our own version of the Book of 5 Rings. Line by line, in every decision, every habit, every moment of presence or distraction. The question is, what kind of book are you writing? Is it one of discipline or disorder, of truth or illusion, of strength or surrender? And if someone read it, your life, your legacy, would it inspire courage or would it serve as a warning? The Musashi way is not about being a warrior in a literal sense. It's about being a warrior in the way you show up to life. How you face adversity, how you confront your own weakness, how you live when no one's watching. You don't need a sword to follow the path. You just need a commitment to never betray your potential again. So let's end with this. If you died today, what would remain undone, unsaid, unlived? And more importantly, why? What excuse, what fear, what lie have you allowed to delay the life you were meant to lead? Musashi's life was his answer. Let your life be yours, because discipline is not about control, it's about freedom. And warriors don't wait, they act, they honor the way, and they die with nothing left undone.